Get going here to do some coffee talk, but I'll talk a few more minutes about welcoming everybody to the morning show, and we're excited to raise some more funds. Wrap it up, or all right. So I'm going to send it back to the main room. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Heidi.
Thanks. And we thank you. Just an update. We are currently at $17,128. We still have a ways to go. So continue to share our feed on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitch with your friends and your family, and even folks that you don't know. You can start watch parties. You can start groups, but we definitely need all the community help, all the support we can possibly muster up and get to reach our goal of $30,000 to continue serving the trans expansive community of St. Louis. So again, thank you so much for continuing to be here with us and to watch and just be attentive and learn and grow with us. So we have a really amazing segment coming up. We do it every year, but it's where we get community members and leaders together to talk about things that are really important to the trans expansive community. So coming up, we have coffee talk. So come sit in conversation with us and learn something, okay?
It's live, I think. I think you said it's live.
Good morning. Welcome to Coffee Talk. A coffee talk, right? I'm having a hard time not being all Linda Richmond about it. Good morning. I'm your host, Elizabeth Fuchs. I'm going to host this discussion this morning. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the policy consultant for MTUG. I also work as the field education manager at the Brown School of Social Work at Washington University and as a community healer at the Wuchi Wellness Center in the Central West End. This morning, we're going to have a riveting discussion about politics and policy. And the reason it's going to be so riveting is because of my wonderful guests here. And the point of this today is to bring policy to the people. Policy affects all of us. So the more we can engage with it, the more we can understand how policy works, the more we can know about how it's going to impact the lives that we live every day, especially for trans folks. You know, this is my jam. I love talking about policy. I love coffee. I love all of these beautiful people up here. You know, talking about the Missouri State Legislature is also something that I really love talking about. Raising money for this amazing organization. And Sunday, I mean, folks, we are here today to talk about trans liberation, to talk about Missouri state politics, to talk about policy, how they impact people at the ground level. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much for being here this morning. I wanted to thank all of you at home for watching and for donating. And, you know, I want to do just a couple minutes to talk about this relationship, this intersection between policy and the people. So I worked as the former lobbyist for Missouri's statewide LGBT equality organization, Promo in the House, which I feel like gives me a really unique perspective on how policy works in the state capitol. You know, in Missouri, there's discrimination is legal. It is perfectly legal to refuse someone housing, deny someone a job, or access to public spaces simply because of who they love or how they identify. And for the past almost 22 years now, Promo has introduced the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act. The Missouri Non-Discrimination Act, also called MONA, would add sexual orientation and gender identity to the already existing Missouri Human Rights Act. Will this bill, if passed, protect everyone from discrimination? Probably not. But what it will do is add a layer of accountability when that landlord decides that they want to evict a trans woman because her identity has been discovered. Mm-hmm. It will maybe allow a little bit more accountability for that boss who decides they want to refuse a promotion for someone simply because they're gay. It won't solve all of our problems, but it adds that layer of accountability, because what we see at MTUG in the day-to-day is the barriers that people experience by stigma, oppression, not being able to get a job, not being able to secure constant, consistent housing. And we're working hard to meet those needs. So it's both. We need to be working at the policy level, trying to pass non-discrimination protections in housing, public accommodations, and public spaces, and employment. and we need to be working on the ground, helping to meet the needs of this population. So it's both. We also need our public officials, our elected officials, who are willing to listen to our stories and who are willing to take those stories to their colleagues, to the people who are making these policies that affect our lives and help us make those changes. So this morning, I'm so excited that we have a very good array of those folks with us today. So I'd like to go ahead now and introduce our guests. I'll ask them to each introduce themselves and to tell us a little bit about how their role and what they do as an individual or an organization impacts trans liberation in our state. And we'll just kind of go this way.
My name is Steph Perkins. I use he, him pronouns. I'm the executive director for PROMO, which is the statewide LGBTQ advocacy organization. Our main goals, just like Elizabeth mentioned, our main goals are to gain equal protection under the law for all LGBTQ people. And everything we do, all the community education we do, all the trainings we do of healthcare providers, of businesses, of organizations, all of that is with the purpose of building larger support for equal protection under the law. Just like Elizabeth said, our laws do not explicitly protect LGBTQ folks. And what we know is that the majority of people across the country have someone in their family who is gay or lesbian, and they have a framework for who those people are. They think about those folks. Not as many families have someone in their family who is out as transgender, and so they have less of a framework. So even though we work for all LGBTQ folks, a lot of our dedicated messaging, a lot of our programming, a lot of the spokespeople we have are specifically trans or gender expansive folks to create a bigger framework for people about who trans people are and why they deserve protections.
Thank you, Steph. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm.
And I am Representative Crystal Quaid. I am the minority leader in Missouri's House of Representatives, as well as the state representative for District 132. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm from Springfield, Missouri. So as Elizabeth said, in Missouri, we are not a friendly state. Every year, in fact, we are trying to get MONA passed, but we here as of late have seen a barrage of anti-LGBT legislation coming through both the Missouri House and Senate. And so what I really try to do as minority leader is, as already discussed, is share the stories. A lot of the individuals creating these policies sometimes are coming from malicious intent. Sometimes they're not. Majority of the time, they're not. Mm-hmm. And so it's up to us to really convey stories, make them understand sometimes unintended consequences of legislation, but then also advocate for the LGBT population to make sure that folks are considering the population when we are creating policy, that discussion is at the table and that we're not forgetting about all that we can do to help folks throughout Missouri.
Thank you, Crystal, and thank you also too for saying, that it doesn't always come from a place of malice, and that sometimes it is just a lack of understanding, a lack of how this policy will implicate people, and what it looks like when it's actually implemented. So I like that you have that perspective that it's not always about oh, they did this, so we're going to do that. It's about, well, let's find an understanding. Let's figure out where this is coming from and try to squash it, really, quite frankly. But it starts with, let's find an understanding.
I also just want to note that Representative Quaid was also the very first elected official to fly a transgender pride flag outside of her office in the Capitol. So the first time that was put out.
Thank you.
I will add an asterisk that they don't let us have flags outside in the hallway anymore, so you won't see that. They say it wasn't because of that, but all the flags are gone now. So
well,
if you're looking for it, that's why it's gone.
Which is another excellent point, that every action has a reaction when it comes to how this game is played.
For sure.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, y'all. So my name is Jay Marie Hill. I use they, them pronouns, and my role is actually the trans justice organizer at the American Civil Liberties Union of Missouri. So what that is in shorthand is, some of you might have heard of the ACLU. There's actually a national ACLU, and there's one for pretty much every state, if not more than one. Like California has 3, for instance. So there's one in Missouri. We have offices in Kansas City and St. Louis, and my role is to basically run around the state as calmly and peacefully and sustainably as possible, to make sure that I am connecting with trans folks from around the state to connect some of what has been talked about so far, to both build the groundwork to say who are the leaders, how are we connecting to each other, making sure our cities are connected, and that the state overall, we have kind of a way of thinking about our work together and not letting this St. Louis, Kansas City, Springfield, Columbia, rural spaces divides kind of keep us apart, because that's how they kind of keep us on the menu, right? And on the one hand, so I'm kind of traveling around, meeting folks, trying to get us connected, and then I also go to the State House and work with Crystal and work with Steph to try and figure out how do we get these bills passed, how do we get these conversations happening inside the State House, because a lot of us just aren't there. Some of us are working as staff in the offices, but aren't necessarily on the floor making bills, right? So that means there's a huge gap in terms of what people are talking about, as Crystal and Steph mentioned. So there's a lot of work to do, but my passion is finding a way to balance both the on the ground game and the actual kind of being in the house and figuring out who do we need to talk to, how do we need to keep ourselves safe in as much as we can when they do things that end up harming us. Maybe they didn't know, or maybe they're just not in community with us to realize. And so a big part of our work is basically protecting what people don't think of as the civil liberties of trans folks, right? There's this idea that maybe the Bill of Rights doesn't apply to you because you have a new pronoun or something, right? And that's actually not true, because our pronouns are not new, first of all, right? And also, we have violations that occur that people need to know about. And so my work is trying to get us to kind of talk about those more, get those stories told, and make sure we can kind of attack it from many angles to squash the attacks that come at us constantly. So I'm excited to talk with you all this morning.
Excited, thank you. When Sarah Baker, who's the lobbyist for the ACLU, first started talking about bringing this program through the ACLU to Missouri, we were unsure how it was going to work and what it was going to look like and how it was going to be rolled out. And I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so glad that you're doing this work and organizing people. And thank you. Thanks for moving here and doing the work with us.
Doing my best. Yeah, and I should say one thing about the title. It's kind of in between. So when it first started, and in other states, it was called the Transgender Education and Advocacy Program, which is a mouthful when I'm trying to say it to somebody on the floor, right? And so it still is known as that a little bit, because that kind of is what it started as, but we actually call it the Trans Justice Program, or the Trans Justice Campaign, because essentially we're not just trying to educate and advocate until we have to clear our throats again and again, right? We're really trying to make sure that people see that we deserve justice, and it's not about, I'm not here to educate you every single time. I might have to do some of that along the way, but the justice piece is, again, like, we deserve our own Bill of Rights, right? That's actually honored, and we're not separate. We're trying to get the same protections that everybody else already has. So,
Thanks.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. So
There he
I'm
is.
Sarah Johnson. I'm the executive director of the Metro Trans Umbrella Group. We are a grassroots, direct support nonprofit dedicated to building power and supporting trans expansive adults with social emotional support. So our organization is on the ground, we are the support in place for St. Louis metro area trans expansive folks. So I hope that I'm the human that is whispering in your ear the desperate need that we have for protection, and the desperate need we have for just our basic needs to be met, because we are experiencing that tenfold now that we have this house, and 20-fold now that we have open hours. I think organizationally, it's been an arc of awakening as far as privilege and as far as sort of the order of trans expansive privilege and power, and it's life or death at this point with a lot of our folks. Our organization, we provide food for humans that don't get food any other way, clothing, toiletries, community, bus passes, so we're that, and I hope that our organization, we work well with all the humans in this arc, and we just will keep whispering the desperate need that it's really a matter of life and death for us.
It is.
Yep.
The both, right? The need for protections and also the need to support people's basic needs. And we will continue to talk about that more throughout this next hour. So we're gonna just dive right in.
Can I say something before?
Yes, please.
I just want to say that, Promo's role is so kind of high level to make sure that those protections exist, that accountability exists. But I just want to say you all are doing like literally life-saving work, and I just I can't appreciate you more for what y'all are doing. And for folks watching, I know that sometimes it feels like it's hard to give everything you have and give, you see folks give $1,000 or $100, but folks giving even $5 is like still incredibly important and valuable, and it all adds up. As somebody who does fundraising to make sure that our staff is paid and we have the resources to do what we need to do, I know how quickly those $5 add up. So actually Representative Crystal Quaid and I have decided to match the next 10 $5 donations come, but we'll both match it. So
Alright.
your $5 will become $15 for the next 10 folks who jump in.
Thank you both very much. So kind. I just wasn't prepared for that. I needed a minute. That's so great. Yesterday, Steph, you were in an interview with Sayer, and you actually set this next part up pretty well, because you were talking about pre-filing and what bills may kind of be introduced during this pre-filing time. So in the Missouri State Legislature, pre-filing starts on December 1st, which means that people can start filing their bills. Even though the session doesn't start until January, people can start just getting ready, getting ahead of the game. And it's a very proactive way to introduce your legislation and, just to kind of get things ready to go for January. So you were talking about that yesterday, and the two of you were kind of like, I wonder what those bills could look like. Well, here we are, day 8 into pre-filing, and within the first 3 days, there was an anti-trans bill that was filed in the Senate. And that bill is SJR 50. It was filed by Senator Cindy O'Loughlin, and she's from northern Missouri, kind of in between Kirksville and Hannibal, where Shelbina and Shelby County and Pike County and Randolph County. District 18, I believe, is that Senate district. And so that bill was filed this week. And so I want to kind of talk with Crystal a little bit first to have her just maybe tell us a little bit about what the bill says, and what is a resolution, why SJR, what does that exactly mean, and how does that, how will we know what to do going forward? And then I'm going to talk with Steph about what the plan is, and which it's all still very new. So we're just going to kind of put this out here and have a discussion about what this means. We're three days into session, and there's already anti-trans bills. So let's go. Let's talk about it.
Okay, so an SJR, what this is unlike a bill that is filed in the House or Senate that goes through both chambers and makes it to the governor's desk, and then you sign it and it becomes law. This will actually go to a vote of the people. And so that's the big difference between this. What the senator's resolution will do is it has to do with biological assigned gender and sports. And I haven't read the bill yet, because when they pre-file, the text isn't actually online yet, so we just get a really quick summary of what the bill is. But there have been a few articles about it, but essentially it's saying that the senator believes it is unfair that if, say, I as an assigned female work very hard to get scholarships or what have you, and I am competing against an assigned male who now identifies as female, that it's unfair to me. And so what this resolution would do is any state-sanctioned sports event, so MISHA, as you all may have heard of that acronym, is the governing body of high school sports. So any state-sanctioned sport, you would have to compete as your assigned at birth gender.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. It's interesting you mentioned that the bill text isn't there, because as soon as I heard about the bill, I was like, what's the text? How are we defining things? What are the definitions? How are they actually gonna test and make sure these kids are who they say they are?
Right.
So those are some of the things that we want to look at and figure out in the bill, what is the bill actually saying? So I want to just talk a little bit with Steph about, when Promo sees a bill like this come in, what are the steps? What do you do? What are you feeling? What are you feeling, Steph?
It's not super surprising. I mean, we know that 2020 is going to be a really rough year. I want to prepare everybody for that. It's an election year, so there's a lot more grandstanding than there is in some other years, and that will be good and bad. There will be good bills filed that we don't typically see to show constituents that folks are really supportive. There will be some really awful bills that don't move at all because they're just being filed, and that elected official is running in a place where they want to be able to say, look what I sponsored. And so a lot of our job is to figure out what bills are real, what bills are grandstanding, what bills are going to move, and how. And that's a lot of talking to leadership to see what the appetite is for moving any of these bills. So when we talk about these bills, we want you to know that they exist and that they are, and that it's okay to be afraid of them, but to take a breath and know that you have to pace yourself through the session. Session is January through May. We're already a week into pre-filing. And if you panic about every single bill that's filed, you won't make it through session. And so I know that that is hard because you see these bills that are super, super scary and are an affront to like our own existence as trans folks. And so I get that feeling. We had a day in the office where we got all of our feelings out, and now we are back in the plan. But you know, we don't know what the intention is. Just like you both said earlier, we don't know if this is just a question. Maybe I don't know anything about the senator's background, so I don't know if she's connected to sports or sex segregated student activities in a certain way. I don't know if she's had some sort of experience. I don't know if this bill was brought to her. We have to find out all of the motivation first. And we also have to see where else these bills are being filed. It's likely that there's a couple of court cases around sex segregated sports, and so this is a talking point across the country. And we need to know where folks fall on it, what questions we can answer to make people feel more comfortable about the fact that the NCAA and that schools across the state and the country have already figured out how to do this and how to allow people to play sports and participate in student activities, because that's a really important part of like growth and development and student success to be a part of activities like this. Trans students, we all know, they go to school to go to school and learn and grow and develop as young people and turn into amazing adults. And that's what they're trying to do, just like every other student. So it's a lot of questions right now, but this isn't the only anti-LGBT bill that will be filed.
Shocking. And you know that based on the evidence of the last couple of years where 2017, 2018 saw a lot of anti-LGBT bills, and we're able to successfully hold off a lot of those anti-LGBT bills.
Yeah, I just wanted to go off of what Steph was saying really quickly, because one of the things that I find that I have to do, at least, and I'm only almost 2 years into the role, so I've had at least just one session to go through and kind of see the arc, of how the conversations start. And I think one of the things that I feel like this bill is a reminder of is that we need to be ready for the types of bills that push like their base, push the people who don't want to hear us, right? And this is not a new idea for some of us who've been watching and following some of the policy stuff. But essentially, like, I like to try to think of these things on really simple terms in terms of like, if people don't know trans folks, where are they gonna turn to for comfort or for clarity, right? And something that, and this is not to stoke fear, this is actually to get us on top of the argument, right? To be on the other side so that we're less responsive and more like, wait a minute, let me like react strategically, right? We have all session to do so, whether or not this is real. It's just something that I think it gets us ready to like take a bigger deep breath and say, okay, cool, let me like be in my fullness. And one of the ways that I think that's important is if we do think about what they think, right? So thinking about this is gonna pull in people who are parents who are saying, my kid deserves blank, right? There's only, I don't know that many parents that talk like that, but in schools, there are certain folks that come at it like that, right? There's gonna be, it kind of makes it seem like, oh, young people are being targeted, or it makes it seem like young people are to be protected in this instance, right? As if like, it's really dog whistling, right? To say, oh, but these people are forever unfair, forever breaking the rules, forever doing too much, right? And so I think while we may be disgusted with those arguments and while we know that that's a target on our backs, we have to turn it around and say, and be clear, because we know that's not true, right? So there's a way that we have to come at this work that's, that can, when we're together, we laugh at these things, right? We're like, that's so wild, right? But we just gotta be in conversation, I would say, about, this thing happened. Next time you're like hanging out with your friends on your way to a place, on your way from a place, like be like, there's this thing that happened. That's so silly. I wanna make sure that we're on top of it. Like making it a thing that we can tackle in our everyday conversation so that when it comes to talking to maybe doing a testimony or being in the State House or talking to one of us, maybe we see y'all, right? We wanna make sure that we're talking about how like what the best angles of this are, and not just that we're kind of defending everybody at once. It's like we need everybody to be a part of this conversation and to say, when you were in school, how would this have shifted your ability to participate, to learn, right? We want to come at this from a stories perspective and from a way that kind of humanizes us in the process, not because we're not human, right, but because they don't know us, and we've rightfully so taken some distance from people who don't affirm our lives and our work and our path. So it's a way that we want to not just be responsive, but also say, not only is that ridiculous, but here's why, and here's how I can come in my full power and let you know that without any kind of hit on my dignity, because that's not actually what's at stake, right?
And that is why you're motivating people around the state.
To give that money, you know what I'm saying? Yeah.
Come at it from that perspective, because it is so much about being proactive. And what I believe, maybe the opposition wants sometimes is for us to just be just buried under all this heavy paperwork and so if we're constantly in survival mode, if we're just treading water and we're just oh my gosh, how am I gonna do this? And you don't realize that there are tools and resources around you, and then you can't get ahead of things. So what we're trying to do is build that proactive accountability, so it's not all responsive. So it's not all just reacting to whatever happens. We build relationships, which is, I think, a lot about what you were talking about, Jay Marie, and then also, what Steph was talking about before, these steps that you take, the relationships that we have with leadership. Our ability in that building to build rapport and build relationships with people in the Capitol, community partners and other collaborators, elected officials on both sides of the aisle. That's how these things this is how this is structured. This is how we do this work. So it's on the ground work with the ACLU. It's promo at the lobbying level. It's Crystal working the work that she's doing with her colleagues to help navigate. It's Sayer making sure the needs are met on the ground level, that, if we can't have housing protections, we can at least maybe find people housing. So it's the whole thing, this whole important arc, all working together.
Gang.
Before we jump off this bill real quick, if I may, as you were discussing, it made me think through one of the things that I really want folks to think about when it comes to preparing for these bills is not only personal stories and how we can share them, but who is the audience that we're talking to and how can we have that discussion. For this one particularly, one of the things that I'm really going to go after is the local control piece of, as you said, right out of the gate, that our schools have already figured this out. Even down in the Southwest Missouri region where I'm from, we've had a lot of schools have situations pop up and they figure it out and they protect the kids and kids can go to school and have a great education. This bill takes away the ability for our local school districts and the local communities to decide what's best for them and for their kids. And this gives a mandate across the entire state. And when you have the conversation around local control and parents and the local schools knowing what's better than what we in Jefferson City think, that is a really great way to have this conversation that then will open the door for us to have a deeper discussion about trans issues. But that is something that no matter what somebody's philosophical leanings are, if you start talking about local control, they're going to lean in. And so I think it's when you're looking at these bills, really try to figure out who the audience is and what ways that can open the door for a deeper discussion.
Definitely finding that common ground to start from and then going in deeper. But messaging and fit who your target audience is for that messaging piece is really important. I wanted to talk with Sarah just for a minute about when bills like this move and when there's media attention. Does it increase the needs? Do we see more people coming, having more needs at MTUG? Is there more fear? Do we hear more from are people just too much in survival mode? So they're, politics is just way over here. I really need to figure out how I'm eating today.
Right. Well, I think it's both and. I think it depends on which part of our constituents we're talking about. When it comes to open hours and the folks that are really in survival mode, just kind of here we go again. Whereas I think folks maybe in support group settings are having feelings about it and thinking about real ways in which it's going to manifest in their lives. So I think it's both and. And I think just, creating a safer space where we can have those feelings and just be in community with each other and hold space for folks that are just, we're not talking about it. We're just not going. We need to worry about eating and, having affirming things on our body, all that. and then have other spaces to talk about it, because it's emotionally exhausting to constantly be having those conversations also. And there are those of us in positions of privilege that are open to having those conversations, and then let's just tenderly take care of our other folks that are not.
Yeah, and I just want to like say something really quickly about that, because I think, and I could have even fallen prey to this before, which is to say sometimes there's particular windows that folks are talking about things, right? And usually we're on the tail end of something bad, right? And specifically something violent or something like murder. Someone has been killed, someone has been maimed or hurt or harmed in the public eye, right? And there's something about that, essentially lately, I would say in the last 4 to 5 years, being the primary way that people are engaging with trans communities and trans people is not only harmful, it's actually transphobic, I would say. And so one of the 10 demands, I'll talk about this, but is holding transphobic media accountable, which people think transphobia is just misgendering someone, right? I actually would go so far as to say being transphobic is actually limiting someone's, obituary in the news to just them being trans, right? Like that alone is disrespectful, right? That's something that we fight for, yes, but it doesn't mean that that's all that I was, right? And so I think there's this piece that sometimes we can assume that because something bad has happened to a community, and that may be the only way that some people have just seen that something bad is happening or that there is a crisis somewhere. For folks who are constantly in crisis, it's almost transphobic to do that too, right? To say, hey, please let me get a response from you. Let me give me your immediate. Like you're in a harm space, but tell me what you're feeling and what I need to do better or how we can show up for you. And that isn't always, of course we want to be supportive and we want to check in, but it's different when you expect folks to consistently have to do that to the point where it almost continues to flatten what they are actually dealing with, because it's like, oh, well, you're not dead yet, so give me your thoughts when you're dead, please, right? So we want to make sure that if we hear something bad or there's something happening, we use it as a chance to make sure we're in kind of educating folks, but not to say that we are demanding a response or demanding almost all of a sudden a relationship with somebody who's trans, who might be reeling from that or who might not want to talk about that, right? So I think Sarah said it really clearly, and I just, for allies or for folks who are not in constant community with trans folks, I think it's a really important point that we don't get told enough.
I just want to say, on this platform, right, this beautiful, problematic Facebook platform that has raised an enormous amount of money for our organization, if you are a human whose only posts on Facebook are about the murder of Black trans women, shame on you. It's not appropriate.
No.
Celebrate us. What I'd like to see are white cis dudes talking about it. Hey, white cis guy, why do you think your brothers are murdering our sisters? So let's shift that emotional labor. I'm feeling it. Maybe it's the lack of sleep. Maybe it's the weariness of this journey, right?
It is.
But yeah, so don't do that. We said at T-Door this year, it's not my quote. I got quoted as my quote. It's not my quote. I do not know whose quote it is, but give us our flowers while we are still here, right? That's what we need to be doing, especially with Black trans women in this community. Lady Ashley held up one of our volunteers with the mostest, who's now our part-time paid staff, Amaya, holding space for her now and giving her that space, because she is powerful and lovely, and just more of that and less of the
grandstanding.
Yes. Oh, let me only
pigeonholing.
talk about the murder of Black trans women whenever I talk about trans lives. No, let's not do that. Let's not do that.
Thank you both. Well, and here, if I may, I'd like to kind of make a connection. So the work that we're doing at MTUG, the food, the ability for people to come and do their laundry, be able to take toiletries, every bag of food, every toothpaste, every roll of toilet paper, that is one less, that is harm reduction. It's harm reduction for our folks who are not able to always secure full-time or part-time employment. It's harm reduction by ways that many of the people that we're serving at MTUG on a weekly basis are working in the sex work economy. And because they're engaging in sex work for survival, to get cash for their basic needs, every bag of food that people take, every opportunity for a bus pass from MTUG is harm reduction. That's one less job that somebody has to take on the streets. And so the way that it's connected is we're doing that work there to help people to stay alive, literally. And then if we pass Mona, and have employment protections, then maybe we also have the ability for that person to venture out of the sex work economy if they so choose, and actually be able to go out into the world and in their full authentic self and apply for a job and not fear that stigma of what if they find out I'm trans, because I don't have those protections. So that is the connection for me. That is how this works. At MTUG, keeping trans women of color who are target populations for violence alive through ramen noodles and bus passes and housing security, and then working with our community partners to help pass those protections so that people can have more opportunities to seek employment. That's how I feel that these things are connected. So thank you for bringing that up. I did want to just, before we move on from this bill, we're talking about kids, okay? Kids. And I don't know if anybody remembers the session of 2017. I'm kind of wondering if Senator O'Loughlin should talk with Senator Emery about what it looks like to have 3 hours of testimony of youth advocating for their rights to use the spaces that they want to use. So I want to just talk a little bit about, what it was like last time to have hours of testimony with kids, and so what that was like, and I caution our leadership there in the Capitol to please not put our kids through that again. But I want to just talk a little bit about what that was like, because a lot of you were there. So if we could just talk about what that was like and the implications that it had on the kids, to just really make sure that we don't go down this path again.
That was a bill called Senate Bill 98. It was in 2017. So 2016 was the first legislative session after marriage equality. And, for a lot of us, marriage equality was just a kind of step in all of this. For some people, marriage equality was kind of like the thing that they were working for. We have always been a non-discrimination organization more than marriage equality. We didn't even start talking about marriage equality until 2012 when things started to move here. But, it happened, and like you said earlier, there's always a reaction to an action. Marriage equality passes in 2015. In 2016, we see the most anti-LGBT bills we've ever seen. There were more than 250 across the country, 22 in Missouri, one of the most anti-LGBTQ bills we'd ever seen move. We defeated it. In 2017, we saw slightly fewer bills, but they were still really bad, and they still got enough traction to go to committee. So you saw Senate Bill 98, which was an anti-trans bill it was a bill that targeted trans students around bathrooms and kind of like sex segregated spaces, like locker rooms and things like that. It was filed by Senator Ed Emery, and it had a committee hearing in the Senate. There were, like you said, 3 hours of testimony. You were the lobbyist, then you were the manager of public policy then. So you and our staff organized these incredible groups of parents and kids, worked with Transparent to kind of help educate folks about not just what the bill was and why it was dangerous, but what the day would look like. When you all come to Jeff City and participate, it's half the battle is like knowing what to expect. What do I wear? What does the building look like? Where are the offices? Who am I going to talk to? What's the reception going to be? Do I need to bring food? Where is food? And so, we brought a lot of snacks. And, but it was, I think, from my perspective of somebody who does this work, it was incredibly powerful to hear these parents talk about the experiences of their kids, the experiences they have with schools, to answer questions to these senators, and even more powerful to hear from these young people who are they were saying things like, all I want to do is go to school. Like, it is just as simple as that. I just want to go to school. And I hope that when people, especially young people, when they participate in things like that, that it is empowering to see themselves as having power, having a voice, having a panel of senators listen to you, and then not pass the bill. That's not always the case when we look at the Missouri Non-Discrimination Act. You put a lot of heart and soul, and then it doesn't pass. I don't want people to feel like if something doesn't pass, or if a bad thing does pass for some reason, that we've all failed. This is a long game. Every time something bad happens, we use it to make something better. So every time you lend your voice or you allow someone else the consent to use your voice, so a lot of times folks don't want to go to the Capitol, or they can't take off work, or they just can't emotionally be there, sharing their story and saying, like, Representative Quaid, you have permission to use my story, permission to tell others. That is just one more time that folks can hear a real life experience of trans and expansive folks from around the state without you having to do the emotional labor yourself of going to that Capitol and taking a day off work, or being there and face to face. But I think that that hearing, having 3 hours of hearing from businesses and counselors and medical associations, but especially parents and young people, was powerful, and that bill didn't even get a vote.
Nope. So thank you for that explanation.
I have so many things to say about that. I will first say, so I'm in the House, and so I wasn't able to witness the hearing, but we were debating, and it was so intense over there that we heard about it on the House side during session, which is weird in itself, but the kiddos locked down the bathrooms, so they sat in the hallway and blocked the restrooms so that the representatives couldn't go to the restroom during the hearing, which I just thought was amazing, that they found their voice and were so strong and were like, you know what, we're gonna take it even further than this. If you're, anyway. For us on the House side to hear about testimony that's currently happening is very, very rare. I think I honestly cannot think of another time that I have been pulled off the floor to be told, oh my gosh, this is what's happening right now, which is super awesome, just to witness citizens taking that upon themselves. But what I want to say about these kids coming to Jefferson City, first and foremost, the fact that they even have to is infuriating.
Yes.
The fact that we are asking children to have to sit and validate who they are to a bunch of people much older than them is just shouldn't be happening. But I will say that when children and their parents come to Jefferson City and share their stories with us, it does move mountains to hear from kids directly. I don't know what it is about these elected officials, but personal stories are awesome. But when it's a personal story from a child, it's just so much different. But then I will say, from somebody on the side who is advocating, to be able to, one, validate somebody's existence and their story, and for them to be able to have a positive experience with me and other colleagues of mine, I know goes a long way. But for me, selfishly, it gives me so much motivation to continue the fight. It's not easy being in the super minority party in Jefferson City and constantly losing these battles, particularly when you love folks who are directly affected by this. But to have these students come and say, this is what it means to me, and this is how it'll affect me, and thank you so much for continuing the fight, just gives us all that power to keep going. And so it's huge.
Thank you. And hearing how much of an impact it provides, hopefully, is motivating, because it's not easy to go to the Capitol. It's not easy. Usually you have to get up pretty early and drive all the way to the middle of the state, and it's not an easy building to get into and find your way around, and it can seem intimidating. So to hear that it's worth it, that it makes a difference. Hopefully we won't have to have, busloads of kids coming to the Capitol this year to defend their ability to, go to school and live and exist. But if we do need that, it makes a difference. And hearing that is really important. Thank you. And I just want a little message to trans youth of Missouri. This crew, we got you. What happens this session, we don't know. We're not really sure what's going to happen, but we will work really hard to make sure that, first and foremost, that you have support, and there are people out there working to make sure that you can grow up to be just exactly whoever you want to be. So I want to switch gears a little bit. We're going to go into, we're still sticking with policy because, that's what I love and why they're here. But we're going to talk a little bit more at the local level. So in St. Louis, we've recently had a court case, a discrimination court case that a St. Louis County police officer has filed against the St. Louis County Police Department. It's a discrimination case. This officer has stated that he has been looked over for promotions on the force due to his sexual orientation. The court did rule in his favor, and now there's all kinds of fun things happening. Now the St. Louis County Police Department, it's the police department or the lawyers?
It's the attorneys for the county.
Okay, are saying, well, St. Louis County was well within their legal right to do what they did. And so while that is gross, it's abhorrent, really, it makes a great case for why we need to pass Mona. So I want to talk about that a little bit. You know, a couple years we've had some bills at the Supreme Court level, you know, at the federal level, that have had implications for what the Missouri legislature does. Do we send this bill around non-discrimination through to get passed when maybe the Supreme Court's going to make another decision, and that would have implications here? So I just want to, you know, how will that how will that how will that play out this year? Will that have any impact? What's happening at the local level in St. Louis? Will it have any implications at the Capitol? What do you think? Will it affect Mona? Will it help Mona get a hearing? Won't it? What do you think?
I mean, I have
Tell us the future.
so
Sarah.
many.
We're gonna need
I'm
more
put my
time.
coffee down because I feel like this. I need my hands to describe all these things. So I'm gonna put some pieces together in a very simple way. So please do not like write a report on the things I'm about to say because I'm simplifying it very, very much. So we've got no explicit federal protections at the federal level. There have been a lot of court cases that have upheld that sexual orientation and gender identity and what's called sex stereotyping, so how men and women are supposed to act, is included in Title VII, which is sex discrimination for employment. Now, that's just some court stuff. Different parts of the federal administration agree and disagree on that. So there are some questions right now at the Supreme Court, at the United States Supreme Court, trying to decide whether or not sexual orientation and or gender identity are actually included in sex discrimination. We still need to pass laws, even if the court decides that. One, because that's only through employment, and two, because it doesn't change the law, it just clarifies around sex discrimination. It wouldn't actually add sexual orientation and gender identity explicitly into the Civil Rights Act, so we still need to do that. Then on the statewide level, we've had a couple of Supreme Court cases that have upheld that a gay man and a trans student can sue under sex discrimination because it's sex discrimination, not necessarily sexual orientation and gender identity. So again, it's like all these
So
like
layered.
weird, like layered patchwork of things that we're just trying to say like we do have these protections somewhere, and we're just trying to find out where the courts will agree that we have these protections. But they all need to be explicitly given. Then we have this court that said like, yes, this gay man who was a police officer for St. Louis County, yes, he was discriminated against because he was gay, and that shouldn't happen. So here's this incredible, giant $20 million verdict. And the county is saying, like, we're appealing because even if he was discriminated against, that's still legal. And so they didn't legally do anything wrong. So again, there's so much happening right here, but that's all to say that there's all of these patchwork pieces of court cases and court precedent and laws and policies, and we're just as a movement trying to figure out if we already exist in any of those things without explicit protections. And I do think that it does lend to the argument that that Mona needs to be passed now, because clearly people and organizations and businesses are liable because of this court case. Clearly, even without protections, businesses need to know how to protect their people because they're still liable in court. And if laws existed, they would have a clearer piece of guidance for how and when to do that, like what that means, what discrimination looks like. So yes, I do think that it helps, but it was also around sexual orientation. And I think that the majority of the folks who are generally with us, you know, our super strong allies are with us on both sexual orientation and gender identity. But there's this like middle grayer group of folks who are with us on sexual orientation and just still uncomfortable or unfamiliar with gender identity. And so, yes, I think it helps, but we still need to be talking more about trans folks and gender identity and raise the familiarity level with this middle group of folks who are with us but don't yet have the motivation to vote with us.
And I also think that it helps that if we've come so far in, let's say, the LG liberation, and this white cisgender gay man is being discriminated against, we like there if sexual orientation is still being discriminated against, then the layers and the many barriers for our trans folks and the discrimination of gender identity, like it, we have to bring people
Just
along with
imagine for
us
2
because there's
seconds,
still
right.
this, right? So thank you for that explanation.
I do think it's important for me to say out loud, and I know that the organizations and people on this little half circle here agree with this, but even though I say that, I want to clarify that there is no bill that will move, that we would support, that would move with just sexual orientation and not gender identity. Even our board passed a resolution, our board resolution saying that if a bill were to be filed with sexual orientation and not gender identity, and it should have both of those, like it wasn't just about couples or something, that not only would we not support it, but we would actively work against it.
And if I may say, I want to give hats off to the work that Promo has done, because we have seen that legislation come through without trans protections, and the behind the scenes conversations that have been had, those bills actually never get filed, or they never move through the process because they work so very closely with the sponsor to get them to understand why that is completely unacceptable. So thank you for your work on that, guys.
In fact, they get withdrawn sometimes.
Yeah,
Hey, sometimes they get withdrawn.
We usually come to you first, though. We're like, oh.
Right,
But you're the ones with the conversation.
And back to how important it is to have good relationships. The relationships in that building mean everything.
Yeah.
One of the bills that they're referring to that was introduced in 2018, sexual orientation only, did not include gender identity. We worked so closely with many people on both sides of the aisle to help get that bill withdrawn, and we were able to because of relationships. Some people they wouldn't even think to ask for help are willing to help and willing to help you shut something down. And sometimes it's just a matter of because you had a really good relationship with them, or I spent one morning sewing a button on an elected official's coat because the button popped off. And so we sat there and had a great conversation. And then later when somebody tried to sell him on a sexual orientation only bill, he texted me right away. I was like, Elizabeth, is this a thing? Is this what we're doing? I'm like, no, we're not doing this. Don't buy it. So it's about rapport. It's about relationships. It's about using those connections. And, the two organizations, ACLU and Promo, so well respected in the building, have great relationships. They can get this done. They can hold things back, help things get passed, and it's about defining what success looks like. Right now, we have to think about what does success look like every day. And I sometimes tell my students, sometimes success looks like I didn't cry there today, so that's good.
And the bill you mentioned that was filed in 2018 that had sexual orientation only, you specifically worked really hard to make sure that we didn't publicly shame him, that we went to him and said, what is going on? Where's the disconnect? This is why this is so important. And now he is one of our main, vocal Republicans in a super conservative area. Representative Mike Stevens down in Bolivar, he is solid on this. He's solid on gender identity. He is he gets that this bathroom argument is a scare tactic, not real. And so that type of relationship goes really far.
And he stands up and talks about it too. There are a lot
Here's
of
what I
folks
learned.
are with us behind the scenes, but
Right.
still aren't able for whatever reason to stand publicly on the floor and say something. And he did. And that in itself was just, it's huge, and really appreciate your guys' work on that with him, and him for being open to the discussion and learning. That's huge for an elected official to be willing to say, I was wrong, thank you for teaching me, and then go advocate for something.
Definitely. And it's also to your point earlier that sometimes people don't know when they introduce something, what the implications are. And I do believe that that was the case, and that it was a little education and awareness and lots of phone calls and letters from all of you, which is really helpful. So when bills are moving and we need your support and we need your help, those phone calls, those letters, showing up in the building, working with the organizations if there needs to be some sort of action, that is instrumental to shutting things down or getting things passed. So when there's a call to action to sign a petition or send a letter or call an elected official, it makes a difference. It really does. So thank you for that.
I mean, I just want to speak to, a minute ago, you just talked about what it means to define success. And I think it's tricky, right? Because policy can be really far away from people's minds. This idea that you got to go somewhere to do it, you can only be in that place, right? And so while that is, kind of December through May, January, right, through May, I think it's really important for folks to know that we're obviously working throughout the year to not only have conversations. I know, we take the whole year off. But we're working throughout the year, and then something that I just really want to point out that I feel like has felt like a success for a lot of people is we introduced at the ACLU and with our leadership table 10 days of trans demands that we did last year in a way, but this year we really brought in 10 demands that are really specific and kind of open that space up for folks to understand what life for trans folks, like what we're fighting for, as opposed to just what we're trying to prevent from happening, right? And so this is 10 different things, some of which are like kind of Mona included, right? So fighting for employment protections, fighting for public accommodations protections, but some of them are really dreams that essentially we haven't let them steal our imagination. So we're letting people know what we're actually fighting for, right? Things like passing housing protections and having housing and shelters in different cities, right? That like the cities that are large enough that should be providing at this scale, maybe 150,000 or so, right? Springfield, St. Louis, Kansas City. We know that we can demand this of those folks because there's a budget there. Like we pay for this service, so you should give it to us, right? Things like making sure that trans kids can learn, right? Making sure that there's GSAs in different schools, right? And so we had a petition that kind of showed that people, as a way to really show legislators especially, right, that in 10 days we gathered 1,000 signatures to let folks know that this isn't just the LG community, this isn't just those letters over there, this is trans folks, gender expansive folks telling you what we need, what we desire, and what we demand. And that's a different kind of orientation, not only to our own futures, but to people who are waiting for us to tell them what's wrong or waiting for us to kind of speak up for ourselves. That 10 demands, I know I was blown away by how many folks really kind of jumped into action. And it is a petition, right? It is a relatively introductory ask, essentially. But I think, just like Steph's list, right? We have people who are on our list, but we really want to be in conversation with y'all. We're not just saying, come sign this thing and we'll see you next year. We're really saying this is a list that we want to be in conversation. We want to have one-on-ones with y'all. We want to sit down, hear what matters to you besides the fact that you thought this was important enough to sign. Like, tell us why. Tell us what you're interested in. Tell us what else you think we should be fighting for, right? So that we can be involved with you in the conversations that are currently happening, where we're fighting the things that are being thrown at us, but also where, again, because we're not coming at this from a place of my dignity is in question, we're coming at it from a place of, this is what y'all need to know, this is where you're behind, and this is what we're actually fighting for. So there's that kind of public education gap that we're really hoping to stand in, because even though it can be labor, right, even though it can be difficult and stressful and like just overwhelming to have these conversations constantly, there is something, and I will never stop saying this, there's something about our magic as trans and queer folks and trans and gender and expansive folks that when we walk into a room, the whole room changes. We all have seen it. It makes people uncomfortable, but it's not our fault. we're in our power, and people are like, you can do that, right? And we're like, absolutely, look at me do it, right? And so to come into the State House and say that, to come into just the Senate, the House, MTUG, anywhere, to be here for these 24 hours and telling people, we're not waiting for you to watch us die to give us money. We're saying we deserve money right now. All 24 hours, there should be money rolling in because we deserve it, and we want to make sure that you see that we're fighting for the world that we deserve. It's not just all bad things, right? And there are a lot. We can't pretend like that's not the case. So I really, like, my hat's off to Sayer and to the whole crew that is making it possible for us to not only, provide for people, but also keep fighting for the future. So thank you to everybody. I mean, we don't have to be done, but I just wanted to say, make sure that that's all there, because I know that I couldn't do the work that I do without what Sayer's doing and without what the crew back here that's behind the cameras that you'll never see. Just people that put in their hard effort, time, and time, treasure, and talent. So thank you for everybody's work.
Thank you for saying that, because it is, it's not just the bottom of the pyramid of hierarchy of needs, right? It's not just getting housing and eliminating all these barriers, finding a job, constant survival. It's about actualizing. Where do you want to go? Who do you want to be? What's the dream? What do you want? So it's not just this constant removing those barriers and trying to figure out how to survive every day. It's yeah, I'm gonna do that, and then I'm also gonna dream. I'm gonna go up here. Who do I want to be? So it's both. And so thank you for bringing that element this morning. You know, we could talk probably for another couple hours because like we are all talkers and we like to talk about this subject. But that is all the time that we have for today. And I didn't even get to all my questions that were really good. So maybe we'll do like an after hours. No, I'm just kidding. So what we did this morning is super important. If you would like to continue to support the work that MTUG does, please, please, please send us your money. And thank you all for being here. Bye.
Hey everybody, we're back. Thank you so much for, excuse me, it's still morning. AM Coffee Talk with all of our community leaders and the people who go to legislation and go to House and like literally like fight for us. Y'all, they're fighting for LGBTQ folks, they're fighting for trans expansive folks. And like we truly appreciate